What's going on, guys? Hope this video finds you well. So, we finally got another PS2 Megami Tensei game remaster. The game in question that received this remaster being Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha vs. the Soulless Army, now lovingly abbreviated to Raidou Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army. Without getting too deep into a history lesson, this game is technically a part of the Devil Summoner subseries, but more importantly, it's one of two action RPGs starring Raidou Kuzunoha, both of which were released very late in the PS2's life. My previous experience with these games is fairly limited. My memories of those experiences are pretty fuzzy, but I do remember bouncing off of Raidou 1 pretty quickly due to extremely clunky combat, even by 2006 standards. After which I did play a few hours of Raidou 2 and was enjoying that much more, but ended up setting it aside to focus on other things at the time. Thankfully, many of those gameplay updates that made the second game more enjoyable have been included in this remaster of the first game, along with a lot of brand new additions and quality of life changes that I will be referencing a wiki to identify and discuss as needed. For those of you who are able and interested in showing additional support towards me in the channel, since this is a one-man operation, I do have a Ko-fi page for direct donations as well as the myriad ways to show support through YouTube. Thank you to those who have shown support thus far, and thank you to everyone else for your consideration. In previous discussions on how I would like to see certain Megami Tensei games be brought to modern platforms, I have stated my desire for a full-on remake of Raidou 1 that at minimum plays more like 2, and that was mainly because I kind of assumed updates to that degree would have mandated such ambition over just a remaster. I think a core reason as to why I came to that conclusion in the first place is the myriad of bare minimum remasters out there, which I think has obscured what is actually possible without remaking a game from the ground up. My point being that this game is very much a remaster still, despite the volume and impact of the changes present here. And I don't say that to dismiss the clear amount of effort present in the remastering of this title, especially in comparison to the SMT Nocturne remaster we got a few years back for the same $50 price point as Raidou. And in this instance, I still think that price point is a tad high, but if this leads to more re-releases of this caliber, I'm fine with paying a bit of a premium in this instance. What I don't think is particularly worth it, at a glance at least, is the Day 1 DLC, mostly consisting of consumables and added ways to grind levels and money and the like. The latter of which is already pretty quick and easy to do thanks to the addition of an Earthbound-esque ambush system where you instantly win a battle if you are, I want to say, 10 levels higher than the enemy you're ambushing. And with that said, as someone who typically doesn't care that much about how a game might sell, I do hope this game at least sells well enough to warrant a remaster of Raidou 2 at some point. In terms of presentation, discussing the music is a no-brainer. Shoji Meguro killed it as per usual. It's not my absolute favorite OST from him, but it is still great across the board. In terms of visuals, however, there is a clear distinction between the art direction of the original release and the way in which it was updated. It should also be noted that the director of the original release was also the director here. I've seen some people say that this visual difference coupled with the addition of voice acting sacrifices the sort of silent film inspiration of the original game, which I can understand to an extent, but it is absolutely not anything that actively bothered me while playing the game itself. Frankly, I find discussing and getting hung up on this kind of stuff to be really uninteresting, especially when the word soulless starts getting tossed around, which might as well mean fucking nothing at this point. I think there are much more interesting and even pressing things to discuss in regards to this remaster. Now for a brief, spoiler-free plot setup for those who want to know a little bit more about what this game is about in terms of narrative. You play as Raidou Kuzunoha the 14th, a devil-summoning detective in Taisho-era Japan. While under the employ of the Narumi Detective Agency, Narumi himself receives a call from a young woman regarding a case she wants the two of you to take on. Upon meeting with her in person, she spontaneously requests that you kill her without any further explanation. And before the two of you can inquire more details as to why she would want such a thing, a group of mysterious red-clad soldiers ambush the three of you and kidnap the girl after handily defeating Raidou in combat. The main case then becomes tracking and rescuing the missing girl, and in the process uncovering layers of mysteries surrounding what's actually going on behind the scenes that led to that initial encounter. This game's story gets pretty fucking bonkers, mostly in enjoyable ways if you're willing to ride it out, but it certainly won't be everyone's cup of tea. Things definitely do get serious at times, with themes of change and uncertainty in an ever-changing and uncertain time period, but it also has a fair amount of lighthearted and at times goofy moments to break things up. And there were times when when I felt the game was bordering on too goofy for my tastes, but despite that, I do think this game's story sticks the landing overall, with the main cast being as charming as they are, preventing me from rolling my eyes at some of the absurd things that I otherwise might have. Structurally, Raidou Remastered is split into episodes, most of which are front-loaded in terms of length, but of course it depends on how much you're participating in the side content. This mainly consists of case files, which act as your side quests, and even though the tasks you're given to complete them are usually pretty simple and not always that interesting, I've found the rewards to often make them worth doing. In terms of playtime, I reached the final boss in around 25 hours on Private Eye difficulty, which is this game's normal mode. This included doing all of the case files available, and before finishing the game, I went and grinded quite a bit for completion-oriented tasks like filling out the devil chart, and then following coming back to actually fight the final boss, I speed replayed through the first 2 chapters on New Game Plus to knock out the last case file and fuse the last demon, both of which are available exclusively in New Game Plus. And even in doing all of that, my total playtime is sitting at just above 30 hours, and I could see myself coming back to replay this game at some point on the newly unlocked Detective Legend difficulty. Regarding exploration specifically, there are a number of districts to run around in that are connected by a world map. Throughout these various districts, there are hidden items to find, NPCs to talk to, and of course the aforementioned case files. Since you play as a devil summoner in this game, many of these tasks do involve your demons, which each have investigation skills for use outside of combat. The utility of these skills is pretty limited, since there's only ever one specific skill needed in order to access a hidden area or an item or pry for additional dialogue, but regardless of the lack of mechanical depth with these, it does help add some extra flavor and personality to the demons under your command. It's also really nice that these abilities don't impede your combat skills all the way back in 2006. Who would have thought that'd be possible at the time? Certainly not another monster collecting series. There's also much wider demon variety here than in the original release, with the added ability to recruit and register multiples of the same demon species. I didn't really use this at all, so I don't know exactly what you might want to use this for. Fusion Search, Reverse Fusion, and Selectable Skill Inheritance are all here as well. Raidou also has access to Sword Alchemy, which allows you to craft different weapons for him. These are presented on a series of branching paths, split between swords, lances, and axes, each weapon type providing some variance in terms of your basic combos, but more importantly, this is how you unlock skills for Raidou. Summoner skills act as your combat abilities. Typically, it's a strong physical or elemental attack, but there are some interesting utility skills to mess around with here as well. Sword skills act as your passives, empowering various aspects of the combat, which I will discuss shortly, or doing things like granting resistances to certain types of attacks and whatnot. For those of you who are worried about specializing in the wrong weapon type for you, there are case files throughout the game that eventually provide exactly enough base weapons, which allows you to unlock every skill by filling in every branch of the tree. Just be warned that this will require a fair amount of grinding specifically for Maka to actually be able to afford to fuse these weapons. Unfortunately, the skills you unlock from these weapons appear to not carry over into New Game Plus. Granted, when I started New Game Plus briefly to finish up some of those completion-oriented things, I didn't do it on the newly unlocked hardest difficulty, so maybe it specifically does it there. If I had to pick one single thing to be patched, it would probably be this. One last thing to discuss before digging into combat is the dungeon crawling experience, which, while definitely not as much at the forefront here as in something like Nocturne, for instance, this is the aspect where I think the devs got a bit carried away in terms of these quality of life changes, most of which I don't have an issue with on their own or in a vacuum, but when I look at the overall picture of how these quality of life changes combine, I'm not as convinced all of them needed to be present. Firstly, there's enemies in the overworld, which I'm totally fine with. It's more congruent with an action-oriented game, and also helps cut down on the tedium of traversal. The problems I have more so lie in some of the changes made on top of this. In particular, there is not only a continue feature, which is welcome for reattempting bosses without having to do the whole reload and rewatch cutscenes, song and dance from this era of gaming, but there's also a very generous autosave feature, as well as a one-slot unlock quick save feature, both of which are nice if you need to step away from the game without being near a save point. On top of this, you can fully heal for free at not only Narumi Detective Agency, but Nakisawame, your typical means of healing within the dungeons, no longer charges you to do so. These kinds of things on their own, not really a big deal, especially because this game is really not focused on the dungeon crawling to the same extent as mainline SMT, for instance. In addition to, as I mentioned, sword alchemy getting pretty expensive by the late game, so I guess removing some of the nickel and diming in this regard is fine, but then it begs the question why Victor charges you to heal in Gomaden, and why you would ever opt to do that on a regular basis. But okay, on top of all of that, you're not only given a mini-map, which is a nice convenience, but also a persistent objective marker, not only for real-world objectives, but also in dungeons. And look, it's not like there was ever much flexibility in how you progressed in this game to begin with, but if there was a way to turn off the objective markers, I would. Finally, moving into the combat, which I found to be generally pretty fun, though it does lean much more in the hack and slash direction than something like a character action game. And as stated previously, it plays much more in line with Raidou 2, which is a very good thing. Though at first, I thought the combat felt a little too chaotic, specifically to warrant experimenting with your standard moveset and combos, but that ended up being something I gradually got more of a feel for. There is a boss towards the very end of the game that leverages these kinds of things, and I was relieved to find that fight to be quite fun, which affirmed to me that there is a strong foundation here in terms of the fundamentals of the combat. A few distinctions though to your typical light, heavy, and aerial combos are Devil's Bane, which is a counterattack that procs by perfect dodging or pressuring enemies with enough damage, Spirit Slash, which is a powerful AoE attack that charges as you deal damage to and defeat enemies, and a shooting mode when you pull out Raidou's gun, which allows you to not only deal gun damage reliably, but can also help lock certain enemies in place, preventing them from warping around out of range of your standard attacks. So of course, the combat doesn't completely revolve around Raidou's moveset, but also his demons, who utilize Magnetite, referred to as Mag, as a shared MP pool of sorts. As you might assume, your demons use their available skills at their own discretion. I didn't really run into many issues in this regard, but if I ever did, it's very easy to issue direct commands or straight up deactivate your demon's ability to use skills on the fly if you're trying to conserve Mag, for instance. And you might want to do this at times because mag costs for skills can be pretty high relative to your total, which makes maximizing your mag drain very important. Your main method of draining magnetite from enemies is by using light attacks specifically and defeating enemies, though there are a number of sword skills that can change and influence your means of draining mag from enemies. In addition to managing your magnetite, you also have cooldowns on Raidou's aforementioned summoner skills. All of these factors amalgamating into something that can often feel pretty chaotic and hard to track, as I stated earlier. The more I played though, the easier it became to figure out what to prioritize and almost at times tune out other things that were happening in combat. And if you run into this issue, the game is very flexible and generous in terms of your various menu options in the heat of battle. Whether it be surveying the battlefield to identify enemy weaknesses, using an item, swapping out your demons and skills, etc. and so on. These kinds of things do disrupt the flow of battle though, in my opinion, but I suppose you could argue that's an aspect that makes this game more of an action RPG than a pure action game. Speaking of RPG-isms in relation to how it affects combat, all of your demons, including those in reserve, gain EXP and loyalty at the end of battle. Once a demon's loyalty is maxed out, it may acquire a passive skill that you can then transfer on via fusion. This is a cool system, but I think the max number of passive skill slots is too many. This, coupled with the passive skills a demon can select on fusions, stacking with previous fusions that demon had been a part of, makes it extremely easy to nullify any and all weaknesses on your demons via resist skill passives, along with honestly a lot of other broken shit. It's strange because you are given so many demon slots as you increase your total demon loyalty, which makes it feel like you should be leveraging that by having a massive number of demons you're swapping between to suit the situation. But because of how easily your demons can become jacks of all trades, the reality ends up being the exact opposite, doubling down on a small pool of extremely powerful and versatile demons. They didn't change the other systems to reflect or accommodate this, making it feel like very contradictory game design. Overall though, despite my criticisms, I did have a lot of fun with Raidou Remastered, and I do very much appreciate the amount of effort that went into this compared to previous remaster efforts from Atlus. But while a lot of the updates were welcome, in particular the updates to the core combat, some of the changes feel less thoroughly considered when you look at how they affect other facets that weren't updated to reflect the changes in question. That said, I am at least glad that this game showcased the scope of possible changes within the confines of a remaster. I'm just hoping that future re-releases strike more of a balance between what was done here and what was done with Nocturne. Like, it's cool that Digital Devil Saga 1 might be able to implement enemies in the overworld and maybe some of the gameplay changes from DDS2, but I don't want that at the cost of the game's overall balance. I think at the very least, more robust options when it comes to toggling these kinds of changes on or off would be much appreciated. With all that said, I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Have you checked out Raidou Remastered? And if you have, do my criticisms make sense? Am I nitpicking? Let me know down below, respectfully of course. And as per usual, I do want to thank my channel members and shout out Space Cowboy EXE at the Super Shadow Operative tier. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe of course if you enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next video.